Good evening, everybody. It's good to be back with you guys again. And so tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about David and Goliath. And it's a fairly familiar story about David and Goliath. It's fairly familiar and it's in the Bible, but I'm going to kind of tell it in my own version tonight. So to start with, our story is going to start over here. And it starts with David while he was in the field, and he was a shepherd. So he would watch the sheep. And so his dad was at home. So one day, his dad comes driving up there, and so he jumps out of the car and goes over and talks with David. And he says, "Son, I was looking at the news, and at this time, there was a war going on. And it was between the Israelites and the Philistines. And so David had 3 brothers that were in the war. And so he said, 'Son, I was watching the war, and I want you to go check on your 3 brothers and take them some food and see how they're doing.' So his dad walked back home, and so David said, 'Okay.' And so he jumped in the car and he left the sheep there, and he went to see how his brothers were doing. So here he goes, and he went over here, and so he traveled over there. And they were they weren't really even fighting because they had kind of like a standoff. And so what was going on is they were both on a mountain. So here we have our mountain. And so David went up here and went up and found his brothers, and they were up there too. And so he asked them how they're doing, and they said, "Well, there's kind of a problem right now." And so David was wondering what's going on. And so they told him that there's this giant that the Philistines have, and his name is Goliath. So this is Goliath here. And they said he is a really big guy. And every evening he goes out, and there was a valley. Here's the valley. So they said he walks out here to the valley, and he dares one of them to come fight him. And they said, but no one wants to go fight him. And so sure enough, David was there talking with him for a little while, and the evening came, and all of a sudden he comes out, and he says, "Hey, somebody come down here and fight me." And he was kind of mocking them, actually. And the Philistines were not godly people. And so Goliath thought this was funny, and so he said, "Hey, why don't you guys come down here? Your God will help you." So he was mocking God, and he would curse God. And this made David really angry because he said that God, you should never curse God. And he was using his name in vain, and he was saying stuff about God. And so this made David angry. And he said, "Well, why doesn't anybody go fight?" And his brothers told him, "Well, he's a giant. He's going to kill us." And so David said, "Well, I'll go fight him." And his brother said, "No, you're crazy." He said, "Yeah, but God will be with me." And they said, "No, you can't fight. You're just a little boy yet." And so he didn't give up. And finally, the brothers told him, "Okay, well, you have to go talk with the king." And so in order to go fight him, David had to go talk with the king. So David jumped back in his car, and away he went to find the king. And so he went over here, and the king was at his palace. And so he jumped out, and he was home with his wife, and that's his wife there, and here's the king. And his 2 little daughters, the one was sleeping, one was in a rocker. They had their little puppy there. And so he goes up to the king and says, "King, I want to fight Goliath." And the king's name was Saul. And so Saul was like, "No, you can't go fight him. You're way too small for that." And he said, "Yeah, but God is with me." And Saul was like, "Yeah, but he's going to kill you." And so he was like, "Yeah, but God will be with me." And so finally he convinced Saul to let him go fight him. So Saul said, "Okay, you may go fight him, but you have to take my shield with you to protect you, and my sword, so that you can kill him." And so David put on, and was like way too heavy for him. And so he said, "I can't wear this." And so King Saul asked him, "Well, what are you going to kill him with then? What are you going to use?" And David said, "You know what? I have this sling." And he said, "God has already helped me kill a bear and a lion with only 2 stones. He said, and God's going to help me defeat Goliath as well. And so finally he convinced Saul to let him go. And so this was already a day had gone by, and so he convinced Saul, and so he went back to where the army was, and he told his friends that I'm going to go fight going to go fight Goliath. And his friends thought he was crazy, but he said, no, it's not me who's going to defeat him, it's going to be God who's going to help me. And so by this time it was ready the next day, and the evening was coming, and so sure enough, here comes Goliath again. Hey, who's going to come fight me? And started mocking God, and come on, your God will help you. And so David quickly went, and there was a stream there. And so he went and found himself 5 smooth stones. So he picked them up, put them in his little pouch, and he started walking toward Goliath. And all of a sudden Goliath saw him coming. And David was like way smaller than Goliath. And Goliath thought it was a joke. He started laughing and was like, what, you're going to fight me? And so he started mocking them and said, did you guys send a little dog to come fight me? Now, was that nice? No, not at all. And so David wasn't scared though. He kept on walking at him, and he came up to Goliath and he said, you know what? You might be strong and big and you might have a huge sword. But he said, but you know what? I come in the name of the Lord, and God's going to help me defeat you because you cursed him, and God's going to be with me. And so David took a stone and put it in his sling and spun it around and around and around and around and threw the stone in and hit Goliath perfectly right on the forehead, and he fell down to the ground and died. And all of a sudden, he had defeated Goliath. And so now the Philistines were scared and they ran away, and the Israelites chased after them, and they didn't bother the Israelites anymore. So what can we learn from this story? Well, do you think David could have done that alone, defeated Goliath? I don't think he could have. It was because God was with him, and he helped David defeat Goliath. But it shows you that when we have a giant in our life, just like Goliath, to David he was a giant. But with God's help, he was able to defeat him. And so when we have a problem in life and we have a giant that we're facing, maybe it's with school coming up and we have a lot of homework or something like that, and it just looks like so much stuff and we don't know how we're going to do it, or we're getting bullied at school, we can always ask God to help us, and he'll be there with us, and he'll protect us if we ask God to be there for us and we have God on our side. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your summer vacation, and as school starts again, I hope you are ready for school again and ready to learn more. So hope you guys have a good evening.